Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where us four Backlog Boys are looking at every single Best Picture winner in no particular order, except for this week, in which we decided that we must watch Gone with the Wind, because I don't know if you've noticed anything about this video, or if you're listening, you might already notice a little changes. The four of us are sitting 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row on some comfortable chairs.
Like a couple of ducks.
Yep.
In a row.
Timo and I could reach out and touch each other's fingers like the Adam.
Don't do it!
painted.
Go! We are hanging out in Tucker's house, and today we are talking about Gone with the Wind because we all hung out yesterday and watched it and let it ruminate, let it stew for a little while, develop some thoughts about the picture, and we have things to say. I do believe. I've got some stuff to say about this film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll pull something out of my ass.
I don't have anything to say about this film.
Just
Sorry.
nothing. There's
Sorry, guys.
nothing in there for Tanner. No trivia, no wins and noms.
No.
None of that.
None of that
from him today. But before we do Gone with the Wind, I think let's do a little recap from last time. Last week we talked about Driving Miss Daisy, which came out in the year 1989, and it went at place number 60 on our list. Let me just double check what that score was.
5.7.
5.7. That's
right
correct.
off my dome.
Right off the top of his dome.
He's cheating. He's got the spreadsheet open.
No, it's not even on that part.
We could ask Tucker the score of any movie in Quest, and he would have it immediately.
Yeah, he would
Stuff
have
on
it.
my dome.
Yeah.
So, Driving Miss Daisy, we were just kind of mid about that film.
Yeah.
But as always, go check that review out. Now, Tanner,
I do.
you have.
I read your mind.
Oh, you read my Tanner. You want to marry me? Thank
This
you
is
so
the,
much.
This
I
is
do.
the ability of having an in-person episode.
Oh,
we can
God.
read each other's minds perfectly.
Yeah. Beware the BLB world domination because
Yes.
his wavelengths have.
The BLB Unimind is forming right now.
Oh.
Tanner has comments. No, is the bottom line.
That's the bottom line right here. We have, classically, this is going to be a classic in-person episode of BLB. And classically, we do have our two biggest fans, the two great sons of BLB,
Yep.
Dan's and John Tour 11. I'll start with Dan's.
Represent.
He's got the more recent comment here. Dan's says, I have seen Driving Miss Daisy a couple times. I would give it a 6 or so, and I'm on par with you all. It is a nice, pleasant film that is fairly subtle in its racism POVs, but I think it works fairly well. Not all films have to have a strong message. It can be combined with other themes and such to create a more pleasing story. Of course, by being coy with the messaging, we get to where we are in society now. That's true. Thank you, Dan's.
Yeah.
Sure.
I had to ruminate on that one a little bit because it's so true. I did really like the period storytelling and all the acting, but like many other years, there were many more deserving films to be nominated and let alone one.
Yeah. True.
That's right.
Yes.
And John Tour.
John Tour, of course. Oh, shoot. I thought you guys would have a longer break. Me, I'm still in Rome sipping drinks and can't go back to BLBing until next week.
That's so sad.
Oh.
That's the worst possible situation.
Yeah.
to be in.
Jet setting John Tour.
Hello. I was looking at the list so far. Wasn't Midnight Cowboy / All About Eve placed above what's TBYOOL? Do we know what that one is?
The bridge on Yolu.
the best, here it is. Best year of our lives.
Well, the best years of our lives. Part for.
The bridge on.
I have a slight memory of Eve being second in that 4-way tie. I could be wrong though. Is John Tor calling us out?
Do we
right
need to
now?
have an audit on where those
Oh, we
movies
need to have
must
a Quest audit.
Here's what I think probably happened.
Yeah,
Those were early episodes of the show.
yeah.
I think that might have been pre-re-rank.
Possibly.
So
yeah.
John Tour, you remember 5th member of Quest for the Bestest.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Completely redid our list effectively. You made me do math for the first time in many years, figure out a new system.
And I'll never forgive you for that personally.
And that changed the positions of some films.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's possible that's what you're thinking of. If not, we made a mistake, but we refuse to take any accountability.
Yes. Regardless of what transpired, it's not our fault.
It's not our fault. Okay. Well, you know what is our fault? We watched Gone with the Wind yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a fault of our own, is it not?
So we need to talk about it. Who wants to go first? Should we start in the middle, work our way in from the outsides, go down the list?
Let's go around the horn.
We might as well zoom, as you
Go
put
around
it.
the horn.
Oh, Gone with the Wind. I saw this movie a couple years ago with my mother. And obviously, this is one of the films of all time. This is one of those Best Picture winners where you don't even question it. It's like, yeah. Of course it's won Best Picture. It's still talked about today. It's widely regarded, high quality, all that kind of stuff. But the pervading factor, I think, of our discussion here and my first experience with this film is, yeah, it's really impressive, but it's just so long. And I think that this second viewing, I was able to recognize why maybe some other movies that we've seen for this show work a lot better in justifying their long runtime over this film. I think it works in terms of its scope, in terms of the time period that it's covering. I understand it being long, but this long, maybe not. In terms of the source material we're working with, I don't think it has quite the depth to warrant nearly 4 hours of runtime.
Yeah.
Like an hour or almost. How much longer is the second longest?
Well,
It's minutes because Lawrence is long.
yeah,
Okay.
Lawrence is like 5 minutes shorter.
Sure, yeah,
yes.
yeah, but not almost no movies reach this close
Yes.
to this length in
Sure.
general, and I don't think this movie has the depth to warrant that. But as we'll talk about, there is depth, but a breezy 2 hours 30 Gone with the Wind, I think would be a much better film.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 times in 1 week. So I'm no stranger to a long film, and I really like Oholes. That's one of my personal favorite
That
films.
barely
I've
even
seen.
sounds like Lawrence.
All
I don't know why I associate French with
The
him.
classic French film Lawrence of
Right,
Arabia.
because there's nothing French about Lawrence. I don't know
No,
why
no,
I
no.
do that. I think it just pleases my tongue. But Gone with the Wind did not please my eyes.
Okay.
Because here's the situation, right? I think you feel runtime when a movie feels like it's losing steam. And when I'm sitting there, I'm watching Cyborg shooting guys, right? There's energy here. But I think Gone with the Wind is a film where there's like energy whiplashes. The film is, I think, a pretty slow burn for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right? We really take our time to drink in the deeply racially problematic Southern setting, as we'll discuss.
Yes.
Which is a particular pace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. I think we reach a point of crescendo, as we're going to get into.
Mm-hmm.
But then the film keeps going.
Yeah.
And, we
And
have
going and going and going and going.
And it goes from being.
We said multiple times throughout this. They did it. They made the first movie that doesn't end.
Yeah.
and here's the thing: it's not just 3 hours 40 on the clock. That's a problem for me. It's you reach 2 hours 40, as you're saying, better Gone with the Wind film, because that's where the movie ends.
Yeah.
But then we go from being about sort of story and character to plot,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets plot heavy.
Yes.
And it feels like we're just in the doldrums of I have no idea how the hell this movie is going to end, because we got miscarriages, we got horse accidents, we got faintings, we got crimes being committed. It's really, I think, unclear in its own function by the time you reach 3 hours. And by the time you reach 3 hours, I want to know where that conclusion is. I don't want to be blindly led around for another hour. And that's my problem.
And you frankly do not know where the movie is going to end until the last frame of the film, because as I will certainly get to, I think my biggest criticism of this film, that ending does not feel like a real ending. At least in my eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would concur quite a bit with Abram here. I think that the stem of a lot of our problems is going to be from the runtime. And I was thinking about this, because I don't want to just complain about, the movie's too long, blah 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 blah. I think that the issue that the runtime ties into like pacing things and knowing when to end your story, sort of thing. This is a complete adaptation of, I believe the original author's name is Margaret Mitchell. I could be wrong. But it is a complete adaptation of her novel. This film is, I was going through some trivia. There's a lot of trivia for this film, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
I was going through, apparently.
Really, a 4 hour long film that's been around for 80 years.
With
and
three directors.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get into all the interesting factoids in due time. But I do think it is a pacing issue. It is a writing issue. It is a okay. So you have. I think that Scarlett O'Hara is a very interesting protagonist, and I like watching her story for most of this film. But there it gets to a certain point where the line that I drew was, we get to a certain point where it stops being I'm watching a narrative film, and more to the point where like the last hour of this movie feels like an abridged soap opera, where we are just doing plot for plot's sake. We are throwing drama in for the sake of adding more drama, and I don't think it really adds anything to the character arcs and where the characters went and where they probably should have ended to make a compelling arc for all these characters. But we'll get into that, I suppose. But yeah, I think I feel like we're all on the same basic page with this film.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not going to repeat what you guys said because I mostly agree with it. I think that, Abram, you misspoke when you said your eyes were not happy when watching it, because my eyes are happy when watching this film because it is beautiful. It is really well shot, and there are some just like painterly frames sprinkled throughout that are you're just like, like the use of silhouettes and stuff, and
Sunsets.
yeah.
Those sunset shots.
And just that-
I'm getting goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps, guys.
sheesh,
I know.
whoa.
They're not huge, but they're there.
They're there.
Think about these sunset shots.
Yeah, and so I think that there are very many elements of this film to be really wowed by, but like we've said, there are other I think the story works for me again until that like 2 hour 40-minute mark when it just becomes we just keep adding on all these other elements at the end once we get away from our central location and our central cast of characters. And so I think that while the film on the whole brings me in, it definitely loses me towards the end. This is my second time seeing it. The first time was in the theater. It was a little was I more or less bored in the theater than when I was here? I think the theater was a better viewing experience. It's easier to be sucked into a movie when you're sitting there in the seat and the AC's on. And
You get those sunset shots on the big screen. Just your entire field of vision is sunset shot.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Can I propose a place for us to begin the conversation?
Yeah, please.
I propose we begin where Turner Classic Movies began, because I think it's inescapable to discuss Gone with the Wind without the sort of racial undertones.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we ought
Well,
to...
racial tones.
Right. but
It's about the Civil War.
Right, but the film tries to put them as undertones.
Of course.
And I think that's what we need to discuss, to sort of foreground this, be like, yes, this is here, because nonetheless, Gone with the Wind is an interesting place wherein it is so interested in painting this completely fictionalized and idyllic sense of the South that the film is not about racism, it's not about anything, really. So before we get into talking about the film in that lens, I think we got to talk about it in the contextual lens of what it actually is, as Turner does. So I'm kind of curious how that, for you guys, paints your understanding or viewing, enjoying, whatever the hell you want to say of the film.
Well, obviously, this film glorifies to no end. It never stops glorifying the good old days of when the South had a great civilization, and in the title cards we get capital C, wrong hand, capital C, and capital C civilization, and all the gallantry and all the chivalry is all lost now. This great thing is over.
Yes.
And I'm
Gone with the Wind, which is actually what the
it.
title of this film is a reference to the way that classic, gallant Southern civilization has been lost by the Civil War, because the North didn't allow the South to have slaves anymore, and that's what crumbled their society,
And-
that they can't own people
It was
anymore.
propping up their economy. Is what the whole thing.
because
Yes.
obviously they
Yes.
kneecap their economy and their social norms and all of that. And I think that that's what paints this film in a really interesting light. I think this is a really interesting story to tell. Does it align with my morals? No. Does it align with my viewpoint? No. But I think the idea of these people who are seeing this through, and of course this book was written back just as the Civil War was ending, and people's perspectives from the South, they're just thinking, man, this sucks. And I don't agree with that, but I do think it's an interesting story to tell. And it's interesting that this was not reframed to reflect more current political views when it was made almost 100 years later in the 30s. But also, that was still a time where there was Jim Crow laws. As I'm sorry, I'm cutting off a piece of your trivia, but the fact that Hattie McDaniel, the actress who plays Mammy, first African American person to win an Oscar, was not allowed to sit with the rest of the cast because of the Jim Crow laws that were dividing racially the Oscar ceremony.
Tucker, I need to jump in based off something that you said, because I want to be factually accurate here, because I was curious about this because you brought it up. I also assumed that the book was written around immediately following the Civil War Reconstruction era. No,
Wrong.
Published in 1936.
What?
Sure.
Is that true? Oh, interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Well,
ju-
then
just
never
a-
mind.
Just
huh.
yeah, like
Oops.
I assume Selznick, the book was successful. He swooped in, bought
Yeah.
up those book rights, and 1936.
As we saw, this is a David O. Selznick international picture.
Yes,
It
it
truly is. Okay, no,
Um,
you're totally right. Wow, that was just an assumption on my part, and I apologize. That was false information.
Yeah.
All that just makes me
Engage
think
in
about
a
the
little bit of
film
false-
is just like is it's like, I don't know, revisionism in its history, and like really rewriting very hard what is happening in the South during this time and why the Civil War is being fought, and all of those elements just kind of, I don't know, it makes the film have a bad taste to it when you're watching it, because you're like that's racist, and you're like, oh, that's racist, and like, oh, these depictions of all of these, like all of the black people in the film are just like very stereotyped and very we watched the Turner Classic Movie intro before we started watching the film,
Jacqueline something.
and it provided context to that,
Jacqueline Stewart.
beyond it's like narrative racism. I think that the film has its own problems with its depictions and
misogyny also.
oh yeah, well yeah
Yeah.
can't not have
That's a
that
whole
in
other
Hollywood.
can of
Yeah.
worms.
We'll open it. We'll open it.
But yeah, I mean, I think the most overt thing, the most like insidious thing, is the depiction of the African American characters, the slaves in the film, because they are like it is the thing of like they all love helping out our white family. Boy, howdy, would you look how happy they are all the time, and we're best friends with them. When we've known them since we were children, and yada yada yada. That's the most insidious thing, and that is the narrative that is sold with a lot of this era of literature, literature and film.
There's a scene when we get to the sawmill.
Yeah.
When Scarlett is talking with, I believe it's Ashley, about who are we going to have staff the sawmill, and they're using
and this is after the Civil War.
Right.
Yes,
Right,
Civil War has ended. The Reconstruction is along the way, and it is the narrative. Well, as we'll get into, sort of follows Scarlett, sort of falling into poverty of the Reconstruction era South, and like working her way back up to become a business magnate. She owns a girl boss. Anyway, she owns this sawmill. Is what happens.
Yeah, and they're discussing sort of the use of. Well, let's be clear. They're talking about using convicts as what feels like slave labor.
Yes.
And then Ashley, who proclaims, by the way, that he would have freed the slaves on the plantation.
What an annoying moment where he's like, yeah, well, I had my slaves, I treat them well, but
I would have freed them.
I would have freed them if, for the moment my dad wasn't there, or,
And they talk about in the sawmill how Scarlett does not want to use African American labor because then they would have to treat them better and feed them more in X and Y and Z. And it paints, I think your word of revisionism is right. It paints a revisionist understanding of this Southern economic system and social system. And for me, that has to reflect in my score, a little bit of meta stuff here, because ultimately we're talking about the value of these films today. And I think that on a sort of metatextual level, the messaging of Gone with the Wind has very little value. Now, nonetheless, I think about films like Apocalypse Now. I love Hot Take Tenor. I love Apocalypse Now.
Holy moly!
Oh my god!
And there is no shortage of awful stories from the set of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah,
right?
sure,
And it's important sometimes to contextualize any film we talk about with these elements, right? And so I think it's very important because there's even a line in that Turner thing of like some viewers completely just swept up in the scale and the opera of Gone with the Wind and missed the racial elements. I think it's irresponsible to do that in a discussion of this sort. So I think we foreground it. Believe it or not, very bad. And I think for me, that does have to reflect in my score from a modern lens.
Yeah.
That comment that Jacqueline Stewart made during the Turner Classic thing of, some people just, they almost miss it. It's so quiet about this. I think that is maybe a generational thing of like older moviegoers who grew up with this film and in an era where the movie was significantly more revered than it is now. It is revered. It is a Best Picture winner. It won an insane amount of Oscars. It has stuck around for a long time. I mean, it's obviously been remastered and things of that nature.
It has grossed $4.4 billion across the 80 years of its release.
Yeah, but in its real heyday, I do think that people were much more willing to ignore the racial things because you can contextualize it in its time. And I think as like a time capsule of a time capsule, it is really interesting. Like, okay, so this is a story about a time where obviously these racist things were happening, and there probably were perspectives like this. But then it was made in a time where there was still, there wasn't slavery anymore, but there was still very overt racism in the laws of the country. And so that's interesting. Then looking back at it from today, but then the people in the middle still kind of like, oh, it's okay. Like all of these perspectives, I think make this film really interesting to talk about, even if I don't care about it that much on a very personal level. I like it as what it does in film history is being grand and being important in terms of its scope and its scale and production. But on a personal level, not much. It's just about like the history for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Talk about the narrative, maybe?
Yeah, talk about the narrative.
Production?
I suppose we can get around to all that stuff. So as I said in my sort of opening statement, I think that Scarlett O'Hara is a really interesting protagonist. Because like we joke about it, but at the beginning of the film, which everyone's like, oh, she's a sweet girl, she's unsuspecting, yada yada yada. She's 16 years old at the beginning of this narrative, even though she is being pursued by many adult men, and she is pursuing one particular adult man for marriage, because that is the morals and the norms of the time.
Yeah.
But you start to get a sense, and this is built up upon across the next hour and several hours, that she is like manipulative. I mean, she'll backstab people. She will lie. She will do whatever she needs.
Lots of fake crying.
Yeah, lots of fake crying. Exactly to get
Lots
what
of
she
marrying
wants.
men she doesn't like.
She
Just
married
to like get back at one of the other two men in her life that
In
she
the-
like probably actually likes in
like
her life.
her ultimate goal here is to get with Ashley. Ashley, I forget what his last name is. But
Wilkes.
yes, oh
Yes.
he's part of the Wilkes family.
Related to John Wilkes.
I
Ashley
certainly hope
Wilkes.
so.
Ashley Wilkes and John Wilkes.
So that's what she wants. She has set her goal. She has set her mind on marrying Ashley Wilkes, and basically
That's
everything. She will do anything to achieve that goal. And then she freaks out when he's like, "I don't want to marry you," because that is just an extra goal, an extra barrier in her way for this ultimate end goal. And then obviously Civil War happens. He goes
Pretty
off
big
to
barrier.
war. Yeah, it was a minor thing in the film. I don't know if the viewer caught that at
A
all.
little
but-
subtext by the Civil
a
War.
little subtext. It happens. But yeah, he goes off to war, and then she gets sort of sidetracked with this goal of going back to her homestead, Terra. Sort of rejuvenating it, surviving. Clawing her way back to never being hungry again is the line that she has before the intermission happens in the film. So I just think it's a really interesting protagonist to have in this film who is especially for a 1939 film, who from a modern lens is absolutely not completely moral. She marries to manipulate and own sawmills, and not for love. She steals the man that she knows her sister loves for the only real goal of getting rich.
No, well, getting $300.
Yeah.
At that point,
And-
paying
and-
off the taxes on Terra.
Yeah,
Her
exactly.
sister was set to be married.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Set to be married. Not
Yeah.
even, she got a crush. Set
No,
to be
no, yeah,
married.
set to be married. So yeah, she is an immoral character, I get for sure. And then she is so completely set in her ways that when Ashley returns from war, she is like immediately back on the pursuit of him, despite his numerous like rejections of her. But but then there's like this unrequited thing between them. They're kissing, they are hugging, and stuff like that. And of course, this gets twisted along the way of like in the last hour of the film, like they get caught hugging, and then she has this confrontation with Melanie, who is actually married to Ashley, where Melanie forgives her, and she's like, "What? That doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't have done that. Why would you do that to me?" And of course, we also have the classic character
Right, Butler.
Rhett Butler, who is like the one person in the film that can like see through this veneer that she has, see through the manipulation and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting protagonistic duo to have in this film.
Tanner,
Yes.
I agree.
Thank you.
And here's why I agree. Because I mentioned it earlier, this is a deeply misogynist film.
Yes.
Right? And I think situating the narrative around Scarlett then is quite fascinating because she is empowered to do all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a continued refrain throughout the film is the sort of disbelief at her social and economic and just moral actions, right?
Mhm.
There's that bit character, one of the aunts, who just like always needs her smelling salts because Scarlett's up to something.
On
Yeah.
Pity Pat. Classic
on
on
Pity
Pity Pat.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
And so I just find that in a film that is so like dogmatic in its like idealized understanding of a very rigid, very backward social strata, the main character is the antithesis to all of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I find that to be a really fascinating
Well-
way to hinge this narrative in particular.
Because not only is your main female character, but your leading man is also like this antithesis. He's always being told and then affirming, Rhett Butler is, that he's not a gentleman. He is
Yeah.
not a Southern gentleman, which is kind of this, in my reading of the film, that is like his role, to be the thing that the South is not. And to be,
Yeah.
and to like almost sort of be like representative of the change and what will become. He is like the profiteer, the gun runner, the blockade evader. And so Rhett Butler combines with Scarlett O'Hara to be this like power couple of everything that the South of this like built up structures don't necessarily think that they are.
I think what's interesting is both these characters are an antithesis to each other in a way, and sort of an opposites attract kind of way. But also they're antithesis within themselves because Scarlett O'Hara is not she's a girl boss character. She's a strong,
Gaslighter.
very
She gaslights.
yeah,
and
all
she
of those things.
gatekeeps.
Good lord, I lost my train of thought. Jesus Christ,
Antithesis to themselves.
yeah, antithesis of themselves in that she is a very strong female character. She's independent. She's the one who's running Terra. She's telling people what to do, but also she's so submissive to the patriarchy when it comes to the men that she wants to go after. She will do anything for them. She just sits back and lets them do whatever like they want. Like Ashley tells her something, and she just automatically on her knees. She's like, "Yes, I will do this no matter what." It's like, okay, huh? So you're, submissive to the patriarchal rules of this society, but then you're breaking free of it, and you're running the company, and you're being the first woman ever to drive a cart by yourself, and it's like, what the heck is happening here? But it does make her very compelling and kind of, I don't know where she's going. I don't exactly know what she's going to do in any scenario. I think that's interesting for a protagonist because I don't like her, frankly. Like,
No.
as a person, I would stay far away from her. Like, she's not a likable protagonist. She's
No.
funny in some scenarios, and there is a bit of her that is caring to some people, but on the whole, we're just watching her like be mean to people for like the whole movie and mess with them. And I'm interested in that not because it makes me comfortable, but because I'm like, who the hell knows where she's gonna go next, or what she's gonna say to the next person she comes up to.
Which makes her romance is very interesting because I think that the romance of this film, it works in its dysfunction. It's dysfunctional romance. None of what the characters are doing to like get with each other is working or makes them happy. No one is really doing anything that would actually like make them happy. No one picks the choice that is the path that least.
Well, Melanie's pretty happy, like almost the entire movie, other than when she's like just hiding in the back of a cart with her newborn baby. But other than that, she's like she's happy with Scarlett. Like she's always there for Scarlett. Like,
I guess so, yeah.
And she's
But-
happy with her husband. Her husband loves her. She loves her husband. But also, all that's kind of fake. So that's pretty interesting. The only like happy character has this like fake existence.
And so the way that Scarlett's relationships are all foobarred. They're all of them are just like messed up and her fault basically. She creates them to be in that situation out of all of her different personality traits and the ways that she goes about stuff. I find that to be interesting and enjoyable as a way to just kind of see how it unravels and see how these, fucked up relationships work, basically. Even when it gets even uncomfortable with Rhett Butler being a total like control freak and like domineering husband later in the movie. So I like that the relationships are tough and like grating because I think that's a romance. I don't know. It's like a romance trope, but it isn't. I think it's done very well here, and it works for me. I think I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of time with
That's right.
with Scarlett O'Hara,
And so we get to see her.
at 2 hours and 23 minutes and 32 seconds. Vivian Leigh's performance is the longest ever to win an Academy Award.
Sure. Wow.
Okay.
That's her total screen time.
Yes, that is her total screen time. So she's only absent for 8 minutes of the total, which is a good chunk of that's probably the credits at the beginning. But yeah.
Wait, 2 hours and 20 minutes?
Oh shoot, yeah. This is
That's an hour.
Oh,
and-
sorry.
20 minutes of that.
I this is wishful thinking that wishing the movie was shorter. 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 32 seconds. Yes.
Sure.
But yeah, we want to talk about Clark Gable's Rhett Butler a little bit. I do have another piece that sort of ties them two together.
Okay.
Because apparently Vivian Leigh did not like kissing Clark Gable on set of the film.
Seems like we learn something bad about him every time we do a movie.
Yeah. I mean, the trivia in here just sort of painted him as a sort of a prankster on set.
Oh. It's a wacky character.
Well, because it is rumored that he had bad breath because he had a bunch of fake and dying teeth because he smoked like 3 packs a day.
Sure.
But also apparently he would prank her once he knew this because he would eat cloves of garlic before his kissing scenes with Vivian
Oh
Lee.
my god.
Another quick prank from Clark Gable while we're on the subject. You guys remember the scene? Like, it's towards the end. It's when Scarlett is giving birth to their daughter, and him and Mammy are sort of like sharing drinks.
They're sharing sherry.
Yeah, they're sharing sherry. They would use iced tea on set.
Sure.
But apparently for one of the takes, he actually did switch out with like bourbon or whatever for Hattie McDaniel. So that's a classic Clark Gable prank on set.
Fooling around, you know,
Yeah,
just
just
making
fooling
everyone,
around.
just making everyone feel awesome. on set.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he is. It's interesting that you say all that, and frankly, I assume that there's stories like that with basically every person
Yeah,
involved
yeah,
in this film.
yeah.
In terms of not being nice to everyone.
Mhm.
But I think he's the character I like the most because Clark Gable, in his acting charm, is so compelling. And he does play this really interesting role to like sort of counteract Scarlett O'Hara's just bullshit to everyone. Like, he never takes her shit. Like, he always is still secretly pining after her, but for the vast majority of the runtime, he's like, no, you can't say that to me. Like, you're not gonna mess with me in that way. And he's just like knocking her down a peg. And that dynamic for the majority of the film until they do get married, and then that's all complicated up and spun in a tornado. I really like their dynamic because he is so steadfast, but he's also like cool and charming. It's a really nice, complicated, interesting character.
Well, that's because Rhett Butler is extraordinarily charming. He is
Yes.
he's the rogue, and you know, not quite a
Debonair.
statesman.
He's debonair. You mentioned he's the blockade runner and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they sort of Rhett Butler is an interesting person in the politics of the film because early on he's like, I'm not in it for the politics of the Union versus the Confederacy. I'm not loyal to one side or the other.
I'm in it for Rhett Butler.
I'm in it for the money, essentially. Yeah.
Which is still an interesting part of his character.
Mhm.
He's the Han Solo
Oh.
of the 30s.
Yeah.
Until he decides to join the war because he loves lost causes or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's an interesting line, because not only does it situate him in a weird way, as you're saying, Tanner, of like, he's in for himself until the plot needs him to go off and fight for the South and
Mhm.
be redeemed in the eyes of the audience. I don't really know what the intent of that
Mm.
is.
I think that's absolutely what it's supposed
Sure.
to be because the eyes of the audience here are from the perspective of the Southern audience.
Sure.
You know, are just written for that. So like him not just being out for himself, it's building for the community, trying to rebuild the South. That's what all the characters that you're supposed to like are going for.
Yeah.
So even though I don't think that's the greatest part of his character. I think it's probably the least interesting part to me. It is his character arc, is to become a better person by recognizing that he can and should put his efforts to help others.
Yeah, except when he's a horrible, abusive monster to his wife at the end.
And that's interesting you bring that up, Tanner. I think that Rhett Butler looms large over the narrative.
Mm.
But frankly, I feel like this film just has too many moving pieces. Because Rhett Butler really comes in and out of things, right?
Yes.
I
He
mean,
disappears for months and years at a time.
right,
Mhm.
because we see him as something of a recurrent presence, and he has a lot of great moments. When first Scarlett and Ashley are having their conversation, unrequited love. Ashley, I can't marry her, and then Scarlett throws something at her, and then we see Clark Gable pop up from behind
great
the
moments.
bench, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's got a lot of fun moments,
Mhm.
but he's also materially very important with his character arcs. But he's gone for a lot of the film,
Mm.
and so he goes off to war, right? And the next time we see him, he's in prison.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a horse barn with a window he could open and escape out of whenever he wants.
Yeah.
But he
Playing
doesn't.
cards with the jailers.
Right. He's playing
Which
cards
is funny.
with the
Yeah.
union jailers, and he has this immense fortune, and this fortune is very important to what's going to play out in the rest of the movie.
Yes.
But we really only see him edgewise, and I think that maybe I would have wanted him to be a more compelling and recurrent presence throughout the film because he does interesting shit, especially when we get to the plot part of the movie. Right? I think of the time after Scarlett gets attacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this sort of counterattack being planned in the woods.
Mhm.
And we get rap on the door. Oh my God, it's Rhett Butler. Your husbands are in trouble. The union men's out to get him. But Rhett Butler, can get them out of the situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of telling what Rhett Butler can do, and we see like the ramifications of it. But I don't think we spend enough time with his narrative for me to be ever fully invested.
No, you're absolutely
in his
right.
presence in the film.
What they needed to do from
Mhm.
our perspective is have this be a dual narrative. Is spend half the time with Rhett, half the time with Scarlet. Watch them come together, watch them come apart. See him go to war, learn more about him. See his hijinks, learn about him back in Charleston or whatever. Then we're fully invested. And I am invested in this character, but fully invested in his arc and his own adventures outside of how he's impacting Scarlet, because he's second billed. He's the second most important part of the cast, but probably not in terms of screen time or like amount of time spent with Scarlett O'Hara. Maybe that's Melanie. Maybe that's Mammy. Maybe that's Prissy.
Ashley,
like
maybe.
Who knows? But I do think that seeing him on his own and getting scenes without Scarlett, because we barely have any scenes without Scarlett, that would have absolutely balanced out the film, and I think maybe had it kept it more interesting. Frankly, like I think maybe the reason we feel it drags is because we're spending so much time with the same locations and Scarlett O'Hara, and Scarlett O'Hara, and Scarlett O'Hara. If we had been able to have a scene with Scarlett, cut over, hey, what's Red doing in the war? You know, see a nice action sequence up there fighting the Civil War. Of course, it's fighting from the Confederate perspective, and we're like, oh, geez, I wish they weren't fighting this, but that would have certainly broken up the pace a little bit better and made it feel a little more dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, just another like we get introduced to Rhett Butler as this sort of roguish sort of guy going against being opposed to every other male character in the film, because he gets introduced in the scene where it's all the Southern gentlemen, they're all sitting together while our women are up having a nap, and boy, we should talk about this war that's a brewing. Oh, there's a war brewing, huh? And he's like, "What are you guys talking about?" Like because they're all like war hungry. They're like, "Oh, we gotta give the Union a piece of our mind, and we gotta show them that our way of life is the correct way of life." He's like, "You guys are fucking idiots, honestly. if you're asking for war, quite frankly." So yeah, I think he just is an interesting character from like the historical political side of this film as well.
I will say there is maybe something to that mystique, right? I made the joke that he's like the Jay Gatsby of this movie, right? Because even in that introductory scene, we've got all of the women sort of like, well, I heard he killed a man, I heard he did this, I heard he did that, and that's exactly how to Gatsby, right? And we learn after he's humiliated by Arthur, someone. No. Remember this? The curly head kid who's like, "Oh my god, I'm fighting mad because Rhett doesn't want to go to war."
Yeah, the first guy that Scarlett marries.
And
Frank something.
Yeah, something Frank.
Basically, the point is what we learn there is, he's a really good shot. There's sort of a mythos around this character, and maybe there is a merit to that mythos. But
Frank Kennedy.
But I think that for me, this film just feels so unwieldy and how much it tries to pack in, that maybe it would have been helpful to pare it back and let's learn in a more concrete sense about Rhett Butler and hinge narrative around that. Because otherwise, we're sitting here talking about all this stuff, and my mind's like, I don't even know really where to go, because I feel like there's just like there's a swamp, and that swamp is Gone with the Wind. And there's so much in there. And I'm finding it a little bit hard to parcel out the pieces that I want to discuss, because the film wants to be sort of it wants to be a Civil War film. It wants to be a Reconstruction era film. It wants to be about this family dynamic on the farm. It wants to be about the life of these people that live after the war. It wants to be about all of these different pieces. And I just find myself just going cross-eyed as I'm watching, right?
Yeah. Tucker, it's not Kennedy, because that's the third guy she marries. It's
Jesus.
Charles. The guy who dies immediately at the
dies of pneumonia.
Yeah, he dies
the
of pneumonia.
off-screen
In an
death.
off-screen death through a letter.
And the letter says, like, he didn't die in the line of battle, but he's a hero nonetheless.
He's a hero nonetheless.
Pneumonia.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm just going to spin this off a little bit. I don't know how deep we're going to go into this, but I think moments like that, and frankly, some of the over-the-top ridiculousness of the misogyny of this era, I think there's a dark fun to be had with that, because we were sitting here just joking at this movie's expense. It's not a good part of this movie, but certainly part of my enjoyment of this film is watching them be like, what? Women can't drive carts by themselves? And the historical fact of women couldn't ride trains because the speed of the train would destroy their uterus or whatever, or the napping part. The fact that, ding, 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 it's 1 p.m. Women, time to go upstairs and lie in a pile and nap because women can't stay up. It's like so ridiculous how misogynistic this time was, that just being able to see these things and from a modern lens, like, that's crazy. What the hell were they thinking? I had some fun laughing at that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the way that the Civil War actually plays into the film. The middle section in which the war is raging, the film kind of cuts out all the parts where the South was winning the Civil War for a little while at the beginning.
It really paints him as the underdog, you know. And just jumping in, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but like I love, because there's a number of like text interludes that happen.
Yeah.
And there's one of them where it calls General Sherman like the devil, like
The Great Invader.
The Great Invader. That's what it called him. Yeah. Just like the complete demonization of the Union Army that happened in this film it's something for sure.
It's something. But I think that is where the film is at its most impressive. There are some there is that shot where there's the shot where it just keeps telescoping up and craning
shot.
out. It just it goes, from a single or whatever way out wide.
Oh, I know.
And there's that all the
Confederate
bodies,
soldiers.
the wounded soldiers
laying there and moaning, and the way
the sun beating down on them.
The siege on Atlanta, where you get all the shells blowing up. That's I think some of the
That
moments.
giant building collapsing into fire.
Yeah. Oh, quick trivia about the giant building, since you brought that up.
Yeah, the giant building.
That was the first scene of this film to be shot. Filmed
Whoa.
on December 10th, 1938.
This is going to take a lot of our budget. Let's just get it over with.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy, how unprofessional. We're getting a phone call. Anyway, if there was a mistake during filming, the entire film might have been scrapped just because of how important this thing was.
Wow.
They actually burned a number of old sets to accomplish this, including ones from the Garden of Allah from 1936 and the Great Wall set from King Kong. The fire cost over $25,000 and yielded 113 minutes of footage. It was so intense that Culver City residents jammed the telephone lines, thinking that MGM was burning down. And obviously, they had stunt doubles portraying Scarlett and Rhett Butler in that scene.
Yeah.
One of the stunt actors for Rhett Butler in the scene was Yakima Canutt, classic Western stuntman.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Watch Stagecoach. Better movie.
But yeah, I just wanted to jump in since Tucker brought up the giant burning building during the siege on Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that those are the moments in which I really enjoy this historical context of the film, because even though there's lots and lots of horrible stuff going on in regards to the Civil War, seeing it in its where the film actually allows it to be like really, really gruesome and really horrible, kind of, I don't know, it's a breath of fresh air for the rest of the film when it is so like, oh, this is awesome, and like
it's
this
like
is
an airy version of, or it's like a soap opera version, as you were saying, of wartime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in this brief moment in the middle of the film, we get to see, and the filmmaking I think really supports it, and we have some really, really excellent work here. We get to see what's going on with all of this, the realities of this war, which is a super, super bloody and just awful conflict.
Yeah, the scene that I think maybe the only scene that was emotionally affecting is when that soldier learns his leg has to be cut off.
Yeah.
And they're like, fuck, we're out of chloroform.
Yep.
We gotta do it anyway.
That's rough, buddy.
and like Scarlett runs out of the church because you can like hear him in the background screaming, don't cut, don't cut, don't cut.
Yeah.
That's a really heavy scene.
Yeah.
There's certainly there's a sense of presence in those moments. I have to say though, I was surprised that we never got a shot at Gettysburg. You know?
Mhm.
Or
They talk about it.
and
Yeah.
like, they
Oh,
talk about it, but we never
this
see.
little place called Gettysburg.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's never any battle vignette.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it's to the benefit or detriment of the film. But when I was coming into this movie, knowing that it exists as this incredible scope, I figured, okay, well, we're gonna see
Some
crazy-
Civil War
we're gonna see some
battles.
Civil War battles, and we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting, but I guess it is largely focused on like the plight of the formerly wealthy in the South and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And quite
Oh,
frankly,
no, those poor slaveholders.
I think exactly. The whole middle chunk of this film is the best part. When the South is falling essentially, and she Scarlett is like being a nurse in Atlanta. Then she's like, I gotta get out of here as the city is falling. She goes back to Tara, the original homestead, and they have to like trek across the war-torn Georgia and rural Georgia
With a newly born
Exactly.
baby
With-
in the
with-
back.
Yeah, the sickly mother and the newborn child, and they get back there, and then they have to like basically till the land themselves. Oh no, they have to do the work that their slaves were doing. Boo hoo! But at the same time, that's where we get the affirmation from Scarlett. That's like, I will never be hungry again. I'm
Yeah.
pledging that right now.
Yeah.
And seeing them sort of, lift Terra back up to its former glory, and then like I had to look this up just to make sure this wasn't like a racially insensitive term. It's not. The carpetbaggers coming in, as like, and they're basically people who are like profiting off of
Taking advantage
yes.
of Reconstruction era South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're
I
coming
learned
in.
that in history class.
They're raising the taxes and stuff like that, and she has to scrounge and go to Rhett Butler for money. That's the best part of the movie, and that's the part that really interests me.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think what I'm trying to formulate my thoughts on this movie in my mind, because I still think it's too long. I think that all of these things together don't quite work. It's a little bit jumping around. It's like, time gaps between like scenes that are next to each other can be who knows how long.
The back part of the film is really
Especially with the back part of the film. But I do think that like each part of this film is a reason of why it is interesting. I like the idea of watching the South socially fall as the Civil War starts, and watching this young woman come to terms with the fact that she's not everything will be perfect forever, and then watching her come back up at the grassroots at Terra, very interesting, and then watching her build herself up to being a business magnate and having all that stuff, all very interesting. I think the problem is just that this movie is so long, it tries to do so much, that each of these things that are interesting on their own and do form a cohesive story, and a story that does grow and ebb and flow, it's trying to do so much that I never feel like I can get fully invested in one of them, because any aspect of these things can end at any moment, and we can skip ahead 3 months, 5 years, and okay, now we're on to something else. And oh boy, where did Rhett go? No clue. Like, it doesn't answer a lot of its own questions in the moment, because it's always trying to move on to the next thing.
And I think you're right about that, but I think there's also a deeper issue there.
Sure.
And that, for me...
You're probably right.
And for me, that's the film has nothing interesting to say. And I was talking about this. We were dipping our feet in the Pat Hazel kiddie pool yesterday afternoon, and I was saying, I think part of my lack of investment for this movie is that I'm not like a Southern racist.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately.
Well, we are in the great state of Texas right now.
We are in the racist South.
But I would venture to say that is none of us.
Right. The reason I say this is because it feels like you need to buy into this idyllic understanding of the South as this sort of paragon of virtue in society to glean some sort of message and some sort of stakes out of the fall.
Absolutely.
And so in the absence of that, I think, Tucker, I view a lot of the plot through your lens of like, okay, there's just a lot of shit happening, but I can't hold on to it. I think it might be a pacing issue, but I also think it's because the target audience for this movie is not, you don't want to be part of that target audience.
No. The target audience almost doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So
no, they still exist. We don't interact with them.
My feeling is like, what learnings are there for me in Gone with the Wind? And I think the answer is there aren't any.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talking about like the target audience and like the film. I want the South to fall. I want all these slave holding bastards that are talking about, oh, we want our war, and I'm like, yeah, you want some war, and you're gonna lose that war, and I hope you do.
The scene when the carpetbagger shows up at the very beginning, and like the people are like trying to like climb onto his wagon. He's like, don't touch me, you dirty rebel. I'm like, yeah.
Well, here's the thing about the low stakes. I think that this is the problem that I started this whole conversation with. Is this film, it justifies its runtime because it has so much topic to cover. This is a long period of time. Each of these periods of this period of time is important to the larger narrative of the film, and I understand that they want to keep covering this stuff and go into detail. But there is no large-scale stakes because we're talking about one Southern white woman not having her way. That's the stakes of the film. And frankly, very few characters that we care about die as a result of this. We really never see the conflict in the Civil War. There is no reason why a film of this scope and runtime, why a film of this small stakes deserves that scope and runtime. When we talk about why talking about that now. For instance, why we talk about Lawrence of Arabia or any of the Lord of the Rings movies justifying or Ben-Hur justifying their incredible runtime, it's because they have a lot to show in terms of stakes combined with their scope. We're seeing a lot of different places. We're seeing a lot of different characters, and over time, how things change for a huge amount of people. we're focusing so hard on Scarlett in this film that it's hard to feel like I need to learn about this person and their personal stakes for 3 hours and 40 minutes. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And it kind of seems at odds with itself in terms of what we come to expect out of long movies from today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can maybe sort of transition into there's 3 parts of this film. I feel there is the first part, which is the antebellum South is still being held up. They're very confident that they're going to win this war. There is the part that, like I said, my favorite part of the film, where they are losing. Atlanta has fallen. That's the next has fallen movie, I believe.
Oh,
Atlanta
no.
has fallen. But they are back on Terra. They are there's all this sort of other things going on. Rhett is in prison and stuff like that. And then there's the third part of the film where it's like after Reconstruction, and they have this sawmill, and they have this grand fortune. And they're living in a big fancy house again, and that's the part of the film that I think we all kind of take issue with is where you really start to feel that runtime, which happens to be just the end of the movie as well. But I feel like there's something there. I mentioned this yesterday. I feel like there's something here, and I don't know how this was meant to be interpreted, because I'd have to get into the mind of someone who has great reverence for the antebellum South, of like our main characters, Scarlett and Red. They live together, but they are still greatly unhappy. Rhett is extremely abusive. Scarlett still wants to be with Ashley, but they are married.
They're both alcoholics.
They're both raging alcoholics, and there's this great unhappiness between them that is sort of blanketed by this sort of the great wealth and the sort of the harkening back to the olden days of the antebellum South before the Civil War. I think that might be something thematically that is an allegory for the South itself. That there's a great unhappiness while they're trying to go back to this era that was before. But again, I think that again falls apart like with what Abram was saying. If you don't care, like guess what? There was a lot of unhappiness in the era that you're yearning back to from the people that you enslaved. Actually, they were pretty unhappy. So that was the suffering, and now the suffering has just sort of is just under the skin of what you want, the white people, the ruling class.
Yeah.
I think a question I was curious if I could just explore watching is like, is there anything here that I could take as being critical of the South, right? Is there some way to read these characters as sort of showing the flaw with Southern American life before the war? But I think what it comes back to is like, that is probably me reading my beliefs into these characters and describing actions that might not be there. Because Tanner, I think there might be some sort of interesting idea of like, yeah, these people, try as they may, paragons of society pre-war, even if albeit flawed ones, can't find anything, like there's no sense of rehabilitation post. But even then, like we see other members of the family like living in the nice white picket fences, and we're waving at them.
Other people are happy, so that's a great point.
It's like, oh, we're taking the baby for a little stroll, and everybody's out here and they're saying hi and everyone's happy, right? It's like I feel like it requires too much projection to read that stuff into it. If anything, I think it's supposed to be like a melancholic thing of like, this is the best we could do. We could never reclaim what we used to have, right? Which then comes back to my contention from before.
Yes.
But I do think that a lot of like, there's sure as shit no abolitionist messaging in this film.
No.
But I don't think there's even really any condemnatory or frankly even critical lens to glean from it without me just saying, well, what do I want this movie to be about? You know what I mean? And so that again, it goes back to I don't know what I'm supposed to take out of this movie in 2022. What am I supposed to gain from this?
I think I'm going to draw this whole thing back to what I said sort of in my opening statement of this movie is ending not really feeling like anything. Or I said it somewhere near the start of this. The ending puzzles me because, and full disclosure, I had to record yesterday. I sort of intentionally drifted off to sleep so I would be rested for another recording. But I'd already seen this movie and I sort of understood the direction it was going. But I perked back up as the movie was wrapping up because I knew it was wrapping up. because I checked the clock and it was almost the time that this movie was going to be over at the time we had started it. And then I was like, I couldn't quite remember where's this movie going to end. And I think the reason why I felt that and why I still continue to feel that the ending is poor is because it feels like a sequel bait. It doesn't feel like a conclusive ending to Scarlett O'Hara's character, to Rhett Butler's character, to anything we've been building to. It is that Scarlett is determined and she knows she's going to go get her man back again later on. That's what she's been doing the whole film. That's what we've been building to in a cycle, in a boom, boom, boom. And then it just peters off and we end on a line of yearning that isn't particularly triumphant, a little bit melancholic, but it doesn't feel like a concrete ending for particularly any aspect of the film.
I agree. I just want to say, because I wanted to look up Gone with the Wind sequel. If you look up Gone with the Wind, one of the top autocompletes is Gone with the Wind fan fiction.
Uh-oh.
I have nothing to add. I just wanted to point that out.
There is a Gone with the Wind sequel TV miniseries called Scarlet, starring Timothy Dalton in the Rhett Butler role. I don't know who's in the Scarlett O'Hara
interesting.
role. Yes. Well, yeah, there it is.
I see.
We're getting distracted on the
Looks
internet.
there's a
over
book
here.
as well.
Oh, the book? Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
But Tucker, I think you're right. I think the film feels let's just keep exposing. I think underarching issues of the film,
Sure.
overarching issues of the film. That's what I'm looking for.
Arcing.
Yeah.
Some kind of arc.
Speaking of arcs, I think that Scarlett's character arc is very peculiar.
Hmm.
Because there's no sense of resolution to me. I agree
Yes,
with Tucker.
well, because that's what the ending is. The problem with the ending. Absolutely.
Right, and I have no problem with the film having an intentionally unsatisfying ending.
Sure.
Right, that's a narrative choice.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna make me sit here for 4 hours, and I'm already questioning what the point of it is.
Yeah.
Ending that in a like a bizarre, abrupt way doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Yeah. Because Abram, you mentioned the child horse death and the miscarriaging and her sister dying and stuff
Within
like
15 minutes of screen time, there are 3 deaths that, in their proximity, in their editing, are funny.
Yeah.
And that is not the intention of the film by any stretch of the imagination.
No, because you get to, like, especially with their daughter dying from by riding her pony, you can see that coming from a mile away because that's how her father died and stuff like that. And the hard cut from a child flailing in the air and smacking into the ground to like the close up of the grave wreath or whatever.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah,
It is ridiculous.
And it is immediate as well. Like with when again Rhett Butler being a horrible abusive monster pushes Scarlett down the stairs at the thought of her having another baby and giving her a miscarriage happens immediately after that concept is introduced.
Yeah, Timo,
Yeah.
what is the famous quest word? You know it.
I know what it is. Subtleism.
And the film lacks it in the end.
Yes.
Like it literally is. Oh gosh, Scarlett, it would suck if you had an accident right now with the baby.
Bow.
Immediately have an accident
Yeah.
with the baby. Scarlett going, oh my god, remember how Pa died
Mhm.
on a horse? To hard cut to horse running into fence and girl falling off fence and dying.
Yes.
It feels like the last third of the film was reshot. You know what I mean? Or the second unit made the last third film. The film
Well,
they glued them together.
If you do recall, there's 3 directors that were hired for this film. So yeah, but I totally agree. Like the third act really just does feel. I guess I don't know if you want to call it a third act because this is
The latter third.
The latter third. The intermission comes in the mid at a weird place in the film. I would say that's just something I feel like. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it feels like disconnected vignettes. This third part does, wherein it ends with again Scarlett saying like, "Oh, I need to go back to Tara, and that's how I'll get Rhett Butler back and stuff like that."
Yeah.
Which is just a reaffirmation of what has been happening for the last hour and a half, 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I guess maybe there's something there about her, being caught in this cycle of yearning, of wanting, and stuff like that. I'm sure that is a reading that exists. That is just something I kind of just thought of the top of my head. But I don't know if you guys gleaned anything like that from the film at all.
I'm thinking about what Abram's question of like, what are we supposed to get out of this film in the year 2022?
Mm-hmm.
And I really, it just comes down to that I think this is a very well-made movie, and then it has this classic status. I think is like kind of the reason to watch it. I
Yeah.
think that's why it should be seen is that there are unbelievably insane shots that are just like those silhouettes are really really I think they're special effects. They're not all
There's a lot of rare projection in this film, and sometimes you can tell it. We were always like, oh, do you think they're actually there? No,
No.
this is a rare projection. But those are the best use of it by far.
Yeah, and there's shots with with the huge extra crowds with all the soldiers
Yeah.
dying. And I
Or
think
when
that
all the families are trying to find out if their children have died in this
yeah,
war.
and there's all all the costumes and the score and the sets are really really nice. And so I think that for me it comes down to the craft of the film is a big reason why I wanted to watch it again for this and why
Yeah.
I saw it the first place. And I think that why it should be seen nowadays as in the 21st century, why it's a film that still at least should be seen and thought about a little bit. Even if I agree, there isn't any like thematic material that is making me think, at all, basically.
Critically about the world, learning something new.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting about this film, and as we've been talking about our readings of its racial text and the thematic text, which we've said is pretty vapid, is the movie itself doesn't say anything that reaffirms our beliefs, our perspectives.
Mhm.
But watching this film still reaffirms our beliefs and our perspectives because we're like, yeah, no, it's good that we don't like slavery and racism and misogyny, and it's good that the South had to, entirely rebuild itself after these things, and we're just coming out the other side like, yep, yeah, that's boy, yeah, we were right, and so that's not like super interesting, but it's certainly an aspect of the film. But
Mhm.
I do want to throw it over, a little throw catch, catch.
Yep.
Tanner Extra, read out the wins and noms for this
Oh,
film.
yeah,
We're talking about the craft.
Yeah.
Might as well know what this film was regarded for and its craft. And I think I would say it's probably deserved in terms of craft in like any department you could throw at it. But I want to know what actually came away with.
Certainly.
And I
Alright.
mean, we are in the year 1939.
We are.
Well, this film is when we're talking about what when it came out. So, did this come out 39? That is the golden year of Hollywood, right?
Mhm.
The best year Hollywood had.
Also, also Wizard of Oz as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
came out
Oh.
that year.
Oh my God! I just realized. All right, and now this is something entirely different. But I actually have seen almost every single Best Picture nominee from this year, and there are 10 of them. So I can speak pretty good
Okay.
to
Okay.
a lot of the films from this year. Though, talking, I'll talk about this after we read out these
I'll
wins and
talk.
noms.
So obviously, this film won Best Picture.
Yep.
Vivian Leigh won Best Actress. Hattie McDaniel won Best Supporting Actress, first African American woman ever to be nominated and win for that category. Victor Fleming won Best Director. He was the one who got credit and got the award for the film, even though 3 directors worked on it. I do have a bit of trivia for that, a bit of sizzle for that. This won Best Screenplay posthumously. Apparently, Sidney Howard became the first posthumous Oscar nominee and winner. And very interesting. Best color cinematography, I might add. This was the first color film to win Best Picture. Best art direction won Best editing. Now these are some interesting ones. It won an honorary award for outstanding achievement in use of color for the enhancement of dramatic mood in the production of Gone with the Wild. So
Gone with the Wind?
Gone with the Wild.
Gone with the Wild.
Gone with the Wind. It also got a technical achievement award for the use of coordinated equipment and production. Clark Gable won Best Actor. So those are all wins. Now here are the noms. These are
that's a lot of wins.
That's a lot of wins. These are the ones that got nominated for. Olivia de Havilland for supporting actress, Best Sound, Best Special Effects, and Best Score.
Now, I hate to actually you, but I
Uh-oh.
believe Clark Gable did not win Best Actor.
Did he not? Is
No.
IMDb mistaken?
Well, the Wikipedia.
Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. Clark Gable nominated, did
Okay.
not win. My mistake.
Oh.
My mistake. Read that wrong. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you for fact checking me.
Keeping it true.
Yes, keeping me true blue in many ways. But Tucker, did you have something to add here? You wanted me to talk
about the
over it.
nominees from this year, 1939, particularly good year in the land of Hollywood.
Yeah, particularly good. Let me also pull up any other films that came out this year that maybe I haven't seen yet. So as I said, I've seen actually almost all of the Best Picture nominees for this year because I reviewed the movie Ninotchka, which was nominated for Best Picture but did not win any awards, which is
A travesty, because that is a great movie.
It's a great movie, which is the topic of another show run by my friend Sam Meltzer, and the Oscar doesn't go to. I recommend you go check that out on wherever your podcasts are sold. But the nominees include Wizard of Oz, The Gone with the Wind, Ninotchka, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Love Affair, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Of Mice and Men, Wuthering Heights, and Dark Victory. Now I've seen 8 of those.
Oh my God!
Of the 10.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Wuthering Heights, Wizard of Oz.
Exactly, Stagecoach. A very good year for movies, and I would say good year for nominees. I haven't seen a ton of other nominees from this era, but a lot of those have kind of already slipped out of my mind. Like Love Affair and Dark Victory and Goodbye, Mr. Chips are kind of whatever films. But the interesting thing is that, like, even with what we're saying here, I still do think that this deserves Best Picture. I mean, I don't love it more than Stagecoach or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or Ninotchka. I love those films. But in terms of what this film did for being super impressive and a super quality production and winning, obviously, and being nominated for, obviously, so many awards, yeah, makes sense of this one. And frankly, makes sense that it stuck around for so long.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that?
I was gonna roll into the directing sort of the hijinks and debacles that were going on, which ties into Wizard of Oz, because Victor Fleming, the director of that film as well, was working on this simultaneously as Wizard of Oz was being edited. So this is this is an abridged version of what went down. Okay. So George Cukor was originally supposed to direct the film. He was the one who was hired from the outset. And that it was going well. He was directing a lot of the interpersonal character scenes, and apparently was fired because Clark Gable was not comfortable with being directed by a gay man. George Cukor was a homosexual in Hollywood at the time, and was thus let go. Clark Gable went up to the MGM brass, complained. George Cukor got fired. Then I believe
Clark Gable moment right there.
Yes. So then Victor Fleming was brought on. Because he was an MGM trusted man with Wizard of Oz, and he was working simultaneously on the editing process of Wizard of Oz and directing this film. Apparently clashed with Olivia de Havilland and Vivian Leigh because they wanted to do their scenes based off of the text of the book, while he was much more screenplay focused.
Sure.
And apparently, this is a bit of drama at the time as well. De Havilland and Leigh were both going to Cukor for actual direction on how to act in the film, like under the table. They would go to see him and for pointers and direction in their acting style. So eventually, Victor Fleming left because he's like, I'm doing too much stuff. I'm editing The Wizard of Oz and I'm directing Gone with the Wind. I'm too busy. So then they brought on Sam Wood, who's only there for a couple of weeks before Victor Fleming was brought back to finish the film.
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, but I mean that can definitely lead to some inconsistencies in between who directed what, because believe it or not, the director has a pretty big hand in how the film turns out in the end.
And of course, if we're talking about who has a big hand in this movie, David O. Selznick had an active part.
Good old David O.
in all of this stuff. And I have another piece of trivia
DOS.
about DOS. He's a real POS, if you know what I mean.
Jesus Christ.
There was a fourth director who was consulted for this film, a little guy by the name of Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if you guys have heard of this guy, but Selznick
once or twice.
Selznick asked Hitchcock to help him film the scene in which the women wait for the men while they're doing the raid on the shanty town. This sort of scene it's pretty tense, you know.
It's a very good scene.
Yeah, it's a very good scene. and Melanie is reading the opening of David Copperfield while they're waiting. Hitchcock delivered a precise treatment, complete with descriptions of shots and camera angles. He wanted to show all the characters outside the house dodging. This is what we were talking about. How we wanted to maybe an action scene for Rhett. Hitchcock made a treatment for a scene like that, of them dodging the Union soldiers, going into the sort of the I guess the speakeasy or whatever they have there.
Their hideout,
He also wanted to exchanges of meaningful glances between Melanie and Rhett while inside the house, really get into the character meet right there. But virtually nothing of his treatment was used because David O. Selznick and Alfred Hitchcock hated each other.
Gotcha. Yeah, we heard about that drama on Rebecca. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, just a complete rejection from
the next year.
Just the next year, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, 1940. Well, there
So
you go.
true. Yeah.
That's the next year after this one.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other thoughts about any of this?
Oh, let's see. Do I have any other thoughts? Do I have any other trivias? Let's see here. This was nominated for best score, as we know. Very good score. The Tucker singing around the house while we're chilling out here. Max Steiner was given only 3 months to compose the music. Considering that 1939 was the busiest the busiest year of his career, he wrote music for 12 films in 1939.
Godspeed.
Wow.
In order to meet the deadline, Steiner sometimes worked for 20 hours straight and took benzos to stay awake. With almost 3 hours of music, Gone with the Wind is the longest film score ever composed at the time.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good
So
man.
The benzos really helped them out, I guess.
exactly.
Also, the composer for Casablanca, King Kong,
Yeah.
Searchers, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Big Sleep, Arsenic and Old Lace, Key Largo.
Yeah. And this is just the last piece of trivia here. Apparently Gary Cooper was considered for the role of Rhett Butler.
Could have been
And
good.
he is quoted as saying, "Gone with the Wind is going to be the biggest flop in Hollywood history." And I'm just glad it'll be Clark Gable who's falling on his face and not Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper talking about himself in the third person, apparently.
All right.
I love Gary Cooper.
Yeah. Well, that's about it for my thoughts on Gone with the Wind.
I'm ready to score
I think
this
we
one.
can give this one.
I
We
am-
can reach up to our
Boy.
our computrons here and put in a score. I've been ruminating. I really don't know what you guys are gonna put. To be honest,
Timo, let me tell you, I don't know what I'm gonna put either.
yeah. Let's find out. Okay, I've got my number. Uh,
I got my number.
I got my number.
okay, let's find out what they are in 3, 2, 1. Blunk.
I've only received one pull-on.
Uh-oh. Oh.
There you go. It's up to me.
Blunk, 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 blunk.
Plonk, plonk, plonk. That's a new calculating sound, apparently.
We have the score. The computer did the figuring. It is 7.0.
Okay.
Flat 7. Where is that gonna go on the list? Are we gonna have any
No
ties?
ties for a flat 7.
Oh, thank God. This episode has gone long enough.
Yeah. Well, that means it's a pretty simple our solution for us. 7.0 is gonna put it in between. It'll go below Dances with Wolves and above An American in Paris.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds about right to me. Oh, I guess we got to run down particular scores also, Timo.
Oh, we do have to do the point breakdown. That's
Yes.
right. It's starting from the top. I gave it the highest score, a 7.7, followed by Tucker's 7.4, Tanner's 7.1, and then Abram gave it a 5.9
Yes.
to even out
Yeah.
that 7.0 score. Now, the spot it's going to go at is number 52 on the list,
Okay. All right.
which that's kind of pretty far down there, actually. Gone
Yeah.
with the Wind enjoyers are really going to are going to be coming after us for that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they might. I just hope that they listened to this whole episode before finding out where we put it on the list.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we made pretty good points as to why it is one of the classic movies, but
Mhm.
maybe there's a reason why it doesn't stick around in the minds of modern viewers as hard. It's certainly problematic. It's a bit messy in places, but
I think
impressive.
it's got a messy third act, but throughout it is insanely impressive from a production standpoint, from a directing standpoint, from all three of the directors who worked on this film. I think the performances are good. I like I said, I really enjoy Scarlett O'Hara as a protagonist. I feel like it all suffers a bit from the third act messiness. I feel that is the biggest thing that sticks in my craw about this movie.
And you've got a big ass craw.
I got a big old craw, folks.
I just think that when your third act is as long as some people's entire feature film,
Fair
that
point.
has to count for more. And I just can't escape the vapidness of the thematics as a function of the nefariousness of the messaging.
Sure.
And to me, that knocks it down several pegs, especially in a list contextualizing production values of various things.
Mm-hmm.
Ben-Hur, way more impressive to me.
Yeah. Okay.
X film, more impressive. Y film, more impressive. So I understand its place, but for me, I think its place around the 50s is fair when we find so little to glean from the film thematically, so little to glean from the film sort of textually beyond its scale. So
Yes.
I feel comfortable with 5.9, although nobody is a stranger to me having the lowest
No, absolutely.
on the quest.
That's something I should actually like go through and look at. Just like which how many episodes out of total has Abram given the lowest score at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be many of them.
Good golly.
All right. Well, there you go. That was a pretty good discussion about Gone with the Wind.
Gone with
feel
one blow.
fulfilled.
That's maybe one of the longest episodes we've ever done.
I think so.
Yeah.
And just like that, it's over.
Some might say that it's
Some might
No-
say
no
that
one
it
say
is.
it. No one say it. We all understand.
It's
All
Flo the
understand.
Coop. And if you were
Better name for the movie.
paying attention last week, you might have remembered that we were splitting up the longest movie, Gone with the Wind, with the shortest movie, Marty. So next week, we're saying screw the spin wheel. We're taking a 2-week break. It's for the spin wheel's safety and health and our safety and health that we just don't see each other for 2 weeks, and then after Marty, we'll be back spinning. And you know, the gods of random chance can't be left alone too long, or else they'll do something truly random. And we don't want that.
I believe the wheel is in Rome sipping drinks with John Tor 11.
Yeah,
I think
John
that's-
Tor and
it's taking a break too.
But we'll be talking about Marty next week, and I'm looking forward to it. I've never
90
seen
minutes.
Marty.
God, thank God,
Thank
90
not-
minutes.
See, that's gonna make it feel so short compared
Really
to Gone
is,
with the
yeah.
Wind.
I don't know anything about Marty.
Me neither.
movie.
Oh,
That's all I know.
interesting.
Okay.
Have you
Why
seen
not?
it?
No,
Have any of us seen
actually,
I don't know.
true story. And I'll probably reiterate this next week. I watched like 3 minutes of this. I watched like the opening scene, and then I stopped for whatever reason. Like I just went off and did something else. But yeah, I've seen 3 minutes of Marty.
Well, you're
That's,
about 78 more.
But there's a butcher shop at the beginning. We'll see if that's true or not.
We shall see. We shall see if that's true. We'll come back and report our findings next week, and report our thinkings and opinionings about what the movie is. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Everyone shake hands. We're in person.
Everyone shaking.
Hold hands, hold hands.
Everyone hold hands.
And then Tucker and I will give the peace sign here at the end. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of The Quest for the Bestest. Peace.
I bring my laptop. Oh, Tucker, do I bring my laptop?
He pulls up Showtime on there, if you know what
He's
I mean.
got
Showtime.
Showtime on there.
Remember you would choke me sometimes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do remember that.
That sounds
That's
like something that should go on Showtime.
PLB after hours.
Let's march into the episode to see where it goes in our ranking.
Oh!
Sherman joke.
Wow.
March to see.
Sherman
Killed a,
Clump from
fucking-
the Nutty Professor.
burned
That's
a lot
what
of
I was
shit.
talking about.
He burned a
Yeah,
lot
you're
of
talking
shit.
about General Sherman Clump, right?
Yes.
From the Nutty Professor.